Good evening and welcome to Northbeat. I'm Shannon Scott. We begin tonight in Nunavut, where the federal government has apologized to Inuit families affected by the Dundas Harbour relocations nearly a century ago. For many Inuit, it's a long time coming and an important step on the road to reconciliation. The CBC's Eli Kakasuktaktu now with reaction from the community in Arctic Bay.
Many families and descendants of the people who had been relocated gathered at the Arctic Bay Community Hall to hear the words they've been waiting to hear for years. Gary Anandasangare, the Minister of Indigenous Crown Relations and Northern Affairs, apologized.
It's a very important day for us to, first of all, reflect on the past, the failures of the government, acknowledge that, but also to reset the relationship going forward. Arctic sovereignty is an issue of major concern for many people, and one of the things that we need to be clear about is that when we talk about Arctic sovereignty, we cannot have that conversation in the absence of the Inuit who have lived here for thousands of years.
Eunice Dungaruk was at the community hall to witness the apology as well. She says her late mother died at 103 years old. Kapik Atagutjak would have wanted to be part of this.
My mother passed away at the age of 103, and she knew who the people were that were going through the relocation process. This event was amazing. When the minister gave the apology, we had tears as we felt this was strong and resilient.
The NDP MP for Nunavut, Lori Idlaut, was also present. She says she felt for the elders and she was proud to be there.
I felt for those who gave those speeches, the descendants of the relocatees. Minister Anandasangare gave his apology, and I felt the apology as well. I'm also proud of Arctic Bay residents whenever I come here. They speak Inuktitut and still practice their culture. Although many have gone through hardships, they were able to get through this for their future. I am proud, and that's what I spoke of when I gave my speech.
Some descendants wondered how the people who had been relocated survived without food, without shelter, and on unfamiliar land. The minister says the relocation is a shameful part of Canada's history, and the apology should not have been taken this long. Eli Kakasuktaktu, CBC News, Arctic Bay.
Gold prices have skyrocketed over the past year, but a new report is suggesting exploration spending in the Yukon, BC, and NWT hasn't. Catherine Pilkington explains why.
Over the last year, gold prices have shot up to over $4,000 an ounce. That should be good news for provinces and territories with gold deposits. But spending actually declined in BC and the Northwest Territories in 2024, and the Yukon posted only modest gains, according to preliminary federal numbers. The report says land access, environmental regulations, and permitting delays have hampered BC's exploration industry, and investors right now are cautious.
I think holistically, what governments and what governments either at a federal or provincial or global level know, as well as investors, as well as mining companies know, is that in order to develop resources, it needs to be economically attractive and economically viable. And that requires an environment that means ease of doing business, certainty, and those types of things come into play.
Last year, Nunavut had a whopping 53% increase in mining exploration. Stakeholders in the Yukon and NWT say that shows opportunities are out there. They're just not here.
Investors are looking for certainty. They're looking for streamlined regulatory process. They're looking for simplicity, predictability. They're not seeing that in NWT, which is the same things that you pointed out from the Yukon. And even in British Columbia, in that report, their policy intentions have fallen flat and really are not attracting the investment, despite having great geology. And that's NWT's situation.
Costello says the issue will be a topic for discussion next week in Toronto, where one of the world's largest mining conferences is taking place. Catherine Pilkington, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Medical students could get a true taste of the Yukon in a few years. The Yukon Medical Association is working on a residency program for family doctors. A residency is the final stage of training in the medical profession. It's when doctors see patients under the guidance of experienced peers. The Yukon Medical Association says being able to do that training phase in Yukon will give doctors a chance to practice rural and remote medicine.
They'd be working in the clinics with our family doctors. They'd be working at the hospital to provide care for Yukoners who are either admitted or in the emerge. They would get the full experience. They would be traveling to remote communities as well. And by the time that they are done a 2-year program, we would hope there would be no stone unturned and they would have fully experienced the Yukon.
Bryant says there is still work to do to establish the program. They need a curriculum and agreements with the university credentialed to train family doctors. He says it's unlikely this would all be ready before 2027. The need for housing in northern communities is high. Wait lists for homes are long and supply can't keep up with demand. But now, some relief in Fort Good Hope, Northwest Territories, where 6 new housing units have arrived over the last few weeks. Nadir Hashmi has that story.
Fort Good Hope residents are excited to see new homes in their community. 6 new housing units arrived in recent weeks, 3 just last week. A housing official says many residents are reaching out to his office.
A lot of them are really eager to see who's getting what and what kind of programs are going to receive these units.
He says it's been a long time coming, as funding for these homes was secured over 3 years ago, but winter road restrictions caused unexpected delays.
In our case, the old duplex models that we had purchased were too wide to put on the winter road, and so we traded those in for 6 single units.
Tobac says the Satu community is facing a severe housing crisis, particularly for its most vulnerable residents. 2 of the new units will be rentals, while the rest will support subsidized or transitional housing programs that are intended for families with children or those at risk of domestic violence. According to a northern housing researcher, one of the challenges smaller communities face in addressing homelessness and housing security is the variety of needs and of people's experiences.
To be able to provide a diverse range of housing options for diverse needs is really, really difficult.
She says the work Kashagotene Housing Society is doing is innovative and creative.
We can see that, they're really trying to look at community housing needs from a comprehensive, holistic perspective.
Christensen says these new homes are a step forward, as people from smaller communities often are forced to leave to bigger centers like Yellowknife to access shelters and services.
This provides those same people with a home and a place to, a roof over their heads and an opportunity to try to rebuild and heal and be well in their home community environment. And I can't stress enough how powerful that is.
Tobac says installation work of the new houses is now underway. Nadir Hashmi, CBC News, Yellowknife.
The Nunavut legislature has wrapped up the first full week of the current sitting, and the pending changes and possible cancellation of the Inuit Child First policy is something that came up over and over again. TJ Deere takes us through what happened this week.
One of the big topics discussed was the Inuit Child First initiative, which is set to end on March 31st. Health Minister John Main said there's a connection between eating unhealthy food and poor physical and mental health.
The food supports through Inuit Child First initiative are helping to reduce these challenges, and I believe are helping to achieve better health outcomes.
Okumuut MLA Mary Kalikti also spoke about it.
It's been a lot of comfort and has been very positive for families, and no doubt having lots of benefits to our communities in the Arctic.
Iqaluit Manahayak MLA Adam Ahiak Lightstone asked Premier PJ Akiakok about it.
I'd like to ask, for the benefit of the public, if the Premier would stand and commit to Nunavut and this House that he will continue to advocate, especially for the nutrition-related supports that are currently covered under Indigenous Services Canada.
I tasked my team to consider drafting a letter as well in our advocacy and our continued push to talk about the importance of the program on behalf of Nunavut.
Another big topic was the 5 vans to help elders get around. Akiakok said they're still not in use. The Premier said their contract with the operating company did not have an operational deadline.
The agreement was just for the purchase of those vans within the timeframes that are referenced.
The Premier also said the operator is seeking federal funds to get the vans operational. Arviat South MLA Joe Savikatak later said the usual process for rolling out a new program didn't seem to be followed.
It just seems like it's been a $1 million photo op and the government is trying to wash their hands away from it.
The operating budget for the Department of Health, worth more than $580 million, was approved today during Committee of the Whole. The winter sitting of the legislature will continue next week. TJ Deer, CBC News, Iqaluit.
The pending sale of Canadian North to a private company has one NWT MLA wondering what it could mean for the airport in his community. Plans for a new terminal at the airport in Inuvik are in the works. And now Denny Rogers wants to see it expanded to include something the current airport doesn't have.
We do know that currently the airport in Inuvik does not have security screening, so if there was an appetite to have direct flights from Inuvik to other major airports in Western Canada, Mr. Speaker, we would need that infrastructure in there. If I recall, when the design for the new Inuvik Airport building was completed, and I know it's still on our capital plan, I believe for 27, there was space allocated, if I recall correctly, to have the security screening area put in the building, but I don't think there was a commitment to do it when the building was first built. And I think now, Mr. Speaker, given that there may be other opportunities in the aviation industry in that region, I'm hoping that we'll reconsider that design or certainly look at it again to ensure that we have screening services and security services in there.
In Inuvik could also help with things like catching drugs coming into the community. He also says, paired with the new expanded runway, the airport could be able to accept bigger planes from international destinations. U.S. President Donald Trump cut short a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky after an explosive session at the White House today. Zelensky had planned to sign a deal to give the U.S. access to Ukraine's mineral industry. But the visit quickly devolved into a heated exchange. Richard Madden reports from Washington.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
A stunning, unprecedented, and tense exchange inside the Oval Office as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky berated by President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance.
You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you can...
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No, you've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President.
Trump showing no sympathy ahead of an intended signing ceremony guaranteeing Ukraine's security in exchange for billions worth of Ukraine's critical minerals to the U.S. Western allies believe this high-stakes deal could lead to a ceasefire in Ukraine's bloody war against Russia. But the chat quickly went off the rails.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me.
For you what,
that wasn't with me.
Trump accusing Zelensky of being difficult and greedy.
If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
Less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Their scheduled press conference was abruptly canceled. Zelensky was reportedly booted from the White House, leaving without a deal and raising more questions if the U.S. will continue supporting Ukraine as its war continues. On his social media platform, Trump accused Zelensky of disrespecting the U.S., but adding he's welcome to return to the White House when he's ready for peace. This shocking confrontation has appalled Western allies, but is being applauded by Trump's base, who view Zelensky as a grifter. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
Forced and coerced sterilization of Indigenous people is still happening.
The Survivors Circle for Reproductive Justice has supports available for Indigenous survivors. Join the National Registry and access up to $70,000 in healing support funds for individuals, families, and communities. The deadline to apply is March 31st. If you or someone you know has experienced forced and coerced sterilization, please call 1-877-386-0750 or visit reproductivejusticesurvivors.ca for more information.
The Kanwipita National Inuit Health Survey team is going to every community in Nunavut, speaking to Inuit about their health and wellness. And every answer will help us as Inuit determine our own priorities for a healthier future. Together, we will answer the question, Kanwipita, how are we? Find out when we're coming to your community. Learn more at qnihs.ca.
Why don't throw in first base at the sun? Put my soul between the ball. Now I want it, now I'm drunk. Now I'm running like a flaming pig. Escaping off the attitude. Old man eating all my food. Don't be kind, don't be rude. Just shake your boots and let it all get loose.
It's an issue consumer protection can't seem to get a handle on. A lot of people say they continue to get duped into pricey and unfair contracts for home heating and cooling equipment, all under the watch of a government that should be protecting them. Here's Rosa Marcatelli from CBC's Marketplace.
Please make your way into the studio.
All these people say they were taken by the same company, Provincial Smart Home Services.
Hi, my name is Ariana and I'm here with my dad Juan, and he signed a contract for $32,000.
Jim Ball, Burlington, Ontario. We signed a contract for $50,000.
They say the company made promises when they bought home heating and cooling equipment about government rebates, lower energy bills, and more, but didn't deliver. And then locked them into massive loans with skyrocketing interest rates, involving financing companies they never agreed to do business with.
It's like this is a nightmare for us. We can't sleep, and then we don't know how this is gonna end.
Provincial Smart Home Services is now facing charges under the Ontario Consumer Protection Act. The company says it followed all the rules and has now shut down. Despite that, their customers are still on the hook for those massive loans under the financing companies.
Well, I mean, like everyone here, we're all very angry. But I think in the end, I'm also greatly disappointed in the government system. When is this going to stop?
Bethany Pascudo is a lawyer and advocate.
There just aren't any punishments that match the crime.
She says even in cases where charges are laid, the government often doesn't follow through.
You're only as good as your results.
Case in point, she says. In 2022, Marketplace told you about a man named Saeed Tourbati. At the time, he and his HVAC companies were facing more than 100 charges under Ontario's Consumer Protection Act.
Nobody really cares about your reasons or excuses.
After that story, the government made a confidential deal with Tourbati, dropping the charges and taking him off a consumer watch list. In exchange, Tourbati had to pay restitution to customers, but the government won't say how many people actually got money, nor how much.
It protects the HVAC dealers. It's the consumers we need to be worried about protecting.
Saeed Tourbati says the deal with prosecutors was not an indication of any misconduct and was only meant to ensure customer satisfaction. When we asked the Ontario government how it plans to better protect consumers, it didn't respond. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Toronto.
People in Dawson City, Yukon have been waiting a long time for a new recreation center. It was first promised more than 15 years ago. And now the city says work could finally begin this summer. The final design of the project is nearly complete. It'll be built just outside of the downtown core. It's projected to cost $65 million. The design includes a skating rink, 2 curling sheets, as well as a fitness center and indoor play area. The town's recreation manager says the next step is refining the design, which will go before town council for approval in May.
getting into design of where the electrical outlets are at the moment, that type of granularity, and so getting very detailed. But the more important thing there for residents in Dawson is that we need to provide a good sense of the cost that this will have on an annual basis, the O&M costs, the capital costs.
Robitaille says the town's current facility has been plagued with structural issues for years. The new center would replace it and give the public year-round recreation options. Two major global studies say Earth has now crossed the critical 1.5-degree warming threshold. But scientists say there's still hope for keeping warming below the next target of 2 degrees Celsius or less. Here's Johanna Wagstaff.
1.5. We all know this number, right? The world made a promise to keep Earth's warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the planet already hit it, right? Every single month last year, in fact. So is that goal dead? Two new studies say probably yes. 1.5 was created as a climate target, a long-term 20-year average that we were aiming to avoid settling into. The science shows catastrophic harm to Earth's natural systems and people beyond that target. Scientists from Europe and Canada found that a single year above 1.5 degrees Celsius is a sign that we've already crossed the Paris Agreement threshold. James Hansen is one of the OG climate scientists in this field, and he spoke about that 1.5 number at a recent UN climate talk.
1.5 is deader than adornium, and anybody who understands the physics knows that.
So 1.5 is dead, but it might have been dead longer than we realized. That's because even as humans have caused temperatures to shoot up, we've also been unintentionally cooling the planet slightly via ship emissions. In 2020, new international shipping regulations drastically cut sulfur emissions, and that led to a sharp reduction in these bright reflective clouds known as ship tracks. Hansen and his team found that these clouds have been playing a subtle but significant role in cooling the planet by actually reflecting sunlight back into space. And if you're wondering why not keep the clouds if they're providing the planet with a little AC, sulfur dioxide is really bad for humans and plants and animals and ecosystems. So our climate models have gotten better and better, but they have a notoriously hard time accounting for clouds, which is why we miss this, and partly why warming shot up to 1.5 so quickly over the last couple years.
It's the real world that's telling us what the equilibrium climate sensitivity is. And that's far better than models in which you can get any answer depending on what cloud feedbacks you put in.
So if staying below 1.5 is not a realistic target anymore, what is? 2 degrees? 3 degrees? While most scientists agree that 1.5 is out of reach now, many still believe with aggressive efforts to curb greenhouse gas emissions, we can keep it under 2. Now, how much of a difference can half a degree really make? If we hit 2 degrees Celsius, that means millions more people and ecosystems are impacted compared to 1.5. We start to see shifts in specific climate happen almost instantly with dramatic ripple effects. The global impacts of adapting to passing that 1.5 will already be devastating. But that extra 0.5, it's the difference between managing and not managing the catastrophic impacts on our food, weather, and health. So how about 1.6? The science shows it's aggressive, but possible. And that's why everyone hasn't immediately abandoned the Paris Agreement as we confront the reality that 1.6 is now the new 1.5. Every fraction of a degree counts. 1.6 is better than 1.7. This November, nearly 200 countries will meet in Brazil for COP30. They'll submit their plans to cut global emissions, and you can expect that new number, 1.6, to come up.
That was Johanna Wagstaff reporting in Vancouver. Students at the Robert Service School in Dawson City, Yukon are learning literacy through snow carving. The program is a collaboration between the school and the Yukon Literacy Coalition. The program's coordinator says it's a way to build literacy skills in a hands-on, unique way and have a little fun, too.
It's used to brush horses, but it's also great to sculpt the snow. So this tool we use to smooth out the snow. We can remove lots of material with this tool as well, but it's more for smoothing things out.
Whether you're learning through reading and writing, amazing, or maybe it's hands-on work, there's always going to be a component of reading and writing that comes into it. So for us, we've been building monsters out in the field. So working with the kids, we try and get them to think about the story behind this monster, the name, where it's from, maybe what its favorite food is, and kind of building a background, designing this character. It really shows how they can grow as not necessarily artists, but just as human beings. And one of the highlights with working on a sculpture is you're working with a team. So when I'm building skills with the students, I really focus on communication, collaboration, problem solving, adaptability, and I try and really pull those skills out and discuss those skills with the kids. And when they start thinking about it, they can make those steps, and you see it when they're talking with their friends. And all right, what are you going to work on next? Or can I work on this side while you work on that side? And rather than just kind of a free-for-all and just all stabbing at the snow, they're actually being really considerate with their creativity and innovations.
Having kids come up with an idea, ideation, like in order to do storytelling or writing, you've got to be able to envision an idea. So carving is your hook to get into the idea. You want kids to believe that they're high-end academic students. Ultimately, we want kids to do well. There are so many ways to get to that point. And what's really still new in school is that a high academic student isn't just sitting in a desk with a book. Every student can find something. And if you have something to hang on to as your special thing, the school will be a whole lot easier.
Well, -11 in Yellowknife tomorrow. Not a bad day for the opening day of the Snow Castle, the 30th anniversary of the Snow Kings Winter Festival down there. Of course, the door being cut open, I believe, at noon on Saturday. I am also seeing that we do still have blizzard warnings in place for Rankin Inlet and Arvia this evening. Environment Canada saying those the conditions should improve overnight with blowing snow lasting into tomorrow. All right, that is our show for tonight. For news anytime, you can always visit our website, cbc.ca/north. We're going to leave you tonight with some of the dancing from the feast in Arctic Bay yesterday after that historic federal apology. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shannon Scott. Megan Roberts is back on Monday. Have a great weekend.
One good scheme deserves another.
Stay on him.
I feel we may be in for a challenging few days.
Cheers. Cheers.